The assembly hall buzzed with anxious chatter, every representative glancing nervously at one another. The Crocker threat had grown too powerful, too ambitious. Once, the Galactic Assembly was confident in its fortified worlds and advanced defenses, but now, a gnawing sense of vulnerability had spread, and every ally was forced to question the limits of diplomacy and defense. Carvel, a Xylarian diplomat from a serene world of towering glass cities and quiet skies, sat amid this tense gathering, his gaze solemn. Xylarians like him were trained to resolve conflicts with words and technology, to outmaneuver threats with finesse, never with force. He couldn't imagine why anyone would rely on brute strength to solve problems. But today, even the most steadfast pacifists, like his people, felt fear creeping in. The Crocker Dominion was unstoppable, having already conquered entire systems without hesitation or mercy. Their method was blunt but effective, and each assault was fiercer than the last. The Assembly's debate grew louder, with various species advocating desperate ideas, some suggesting full retreats, others proposing strategies doomed to fail. Finally, one voice cut through the chaos, making a suggestion that silenced the room: the humans. Carvel stiffened at the mere mention of them, the Deathworlders of Earth, creatures who had evolved in a punishing environment of violence and survival. Humans were known as warriors, strategists, and in some circles viewed as the last resort, the species called upon only when peace was no longer an option. "We cannot ignore their expertise," the representative continued. "Human resilience is unmatched, and their ingenuity under pressure may be our best asset against the Crocker." A murmur rippled through the assembly, many agreeing reluctantly. And so, the Xylarians, despite their fear and discomfort, found themselves at a crossroads. Carvel felt his pulse quicken when the council looked his way. After a moment's hesitation, he volunteered to meet the humans. It was the bravest thing he had done in his career, even if it went against everything he believed in. He wasn't sure what frightened him more, the Crocker or the prospect of trusting his people's survival to humans. The journey to the human outpost felt surreal. As Carvel's ship docked on the metal corridors of the space station, he braced himself for whatever chaotic, unpredictable encounters awaited him. In the docking bay, he was greeted by Captain Lila Torres, a tall, muscular human with a warm smile that somehow felt out of place on a soldier. "Welcome, Ambassador Carvel," she said, her voice firm but friendly. "We've heard a lot about the Xylarians." Carvel dipped his head in a formal greeting, fighting the urge to retreat. The human's intensity was palpable, radiating even in their relaxed state. He forced himself to maintain his composure, recalling his mission. "Captain Torres," he replied, his tone cool and practiced. "I'm here on behalf of the Assembly to discuss joint endeavors against the Crocker." Torres's smile only grew. "I understand. You're not the first to come to us, you know. But we take all alliances seriously." There was an intensity in her gaze, as if she was measuring his courage, his resolve. Carvel felt uncomfortable under her scrutiny but tried to maintain his professional exterior. She led him through the station, explaining their plans. "Humans believe that strength lies in adaptability. We might not be the strongest species, but we're one of the quickest to learn and to innovate." Her words surprised Carvel. The human's confidence wasn't about arrogance but an assuredness that seemed almost comforting. His initial fear began to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity. As they continued, they passed several human soldiers training with equipment, sparring in close combat, testing their endurance. It was a scene of complete, almost beautiful chaos, and he watched in reluctant awe as they pushed their limits. Humans weren't just training, they were preparing to confront any danger, no matter the cost. After observing a particularly intense combat drill, Carvel turned to Captain Torres. "Your people train as if they're already facing death." She regarded him thoughtfully. "That's what we do, Carvel. On Earth, we've had to. Death and danger are constant reminders, and we've learned to live alongside them, to keep moving forward." For the first time, Carvel felt a glimmer of understanding. He had never considered that humans had no choice but to adapt. To them, survival was as intrinsic as breathing. Their conversation was interrupted by a blaring alarm, echoing through the halls. Captain Torres's face turned serious. "Looks like you'll get to see what we're made of sooner than expected. That's a Crocker scout ship approaching." Carvel's heart pounded. The Crocker, here? He instinctively wanted to retreat, to flee to safety. But the humans around him were already moving with a sense of purpose, unfazed by the threat. Torres motioned for him to follow as they quickly made their way to the control room, where screens showed the Crocker vessel approaching. "Ambassador, you may want to stay behind the shields," a soldier advised him, but he shook his head, determined to observe. The human forces mobilized with precision, their movements sharp and cohesive. Carvel watched as they worked together, anticipating each other's needs without hesitation. In that moment, he saw the essence of humanity, a tenacity, a trust, an unbreakable will to protect one another. The Crocker ship fired, and the humans responded with a swift counterattack. Their ship moved in ways Carvel had never seen, pivoting, dodging, adapting on the fly. He realized that their unpredictability wasn't recklessness, but a highly developed form of strategy. The Crocker had underestimated them, just as the assembly had. When the scout ship was forced into retreat, the room erupted in a quiet cheer. Captain Torres turned to Carvel, a satisfied gleam in her eye. "Now you see why we're here," she said, almost gently. Carvel nodded slowly. He felt a strange, unfamiliar pride, for the humans, for their survival against all odds. In the silence that followed, Carvel felt a shift within himself. He had witnessed firsthand the resilience that defined humanity. For the first time, he began to understand why the Assembly had placed its hopes in these seemingly chaotic creatures. They weren't bound by the same cautious protocols as the Xylarians or by the rigid structures other species clung to. Humans thrived in unpredictability. After a short debrief, Captain Torres invited him to sit with her in the command room, where she outlined their battle tactics. Carvel leaned forward, intrigued as she explained their approach to warfare, not relying on sheer numbers or strength but on creativity, speed, and adaptability. "You rely on intuition," Carvel remarked, somewhat perplexed. "A skill that most species don't trust in combat." Torres grinned. "For us, intuition isn't just guesswork, it's a finely honed skill. We study, we learn, and we act fast. It's not perfect, but it's saved us more times than I can count." Her confidence seemed unshakable, and Carvel found himself compelled by it. In the days that followed, he observed the human crew with new eyes. He saw their teamwork in action, their ability to shift roles seamlessly, and their unwavering trust in each other. Even when drills intensified, and they pushed their bodies and minds to the limits, the humans didn't falter. It wasn't just training, it was a way of life. He began to realize that humanity's true strength lay not just in their resilience but in their unity. One evening, as Carvel walked the dim corridors, he overheard two soldiers in conversation. One spoke about a family back home, and Carvel noticed the soldier's face soften, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed almost foreign to him. Humans, despite their tenacity, fought not just for survival but for those they loved, for the people they longed to return to. Carvel felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. His people valued peace and preservation, but they rarely spoke of family with such passion. Duty, yes. Honor, yes. But this was different. He began to understand that humanity's strength was not solely a matter of survival instinct, it was a matter of heart. But just as he found himself understanding the humans more, the mission took an urgent turn. Reports arrived that the Crocker Dominion was amassing near a defenseless outpost, an Assembly-allied planet inhabited by a peaceful, scholarly species with no military capabilities. The planet's defenses were minimal, designed to repel only small-scale threats, not the full force of a Crocker assault. The Assembly called for immediate intervention, but every Allied fleet was either too far or unequipped for a rapid strike. It would take days for most of the Assembly forces to arrive. Humanity, however, was prepared to act immediately. Captain Torres gathered her crew in the central chamber, and Carvel was invited to join. She didn't waste words or sugarcoat the reality. "Our allies are in danger, and we're the closest line of defense. They have no chance without us." Her eyes were fierce, unwavering. We leave in 1 hour. Prepare yourselves. Carvel was stunned by her resolve, by the crew's lack of hesitation. They didn't question the odds or the risk. They only nodded, their faces hardened in quiet determination. He found himself wondering if he could muster that level of conviction under similar circumstances. He didn't have much time to reflect. Within minutes, they were on their way, the human ship hurtling toward the vulnerable outpost at a speed that made Carvel's stomach twist. The atmosphere on the ship was tense but focused. Every crew member had a role, moving with precision and purpose. The planet came into view on the monitors, and with it, the shadow of the Crocker fleet looming ominously in the distance. Carvel's chest tightened. The Crocker ships, dark and formidable, were vastly superior in numbers and firepower. But the humans showed no signs of fear. Captain Torres issued commands with a steady voice, instructing her crew to prepare for a strategic assault. They wouldn't engage directly. Such a move would be suicide. Instead, she had devised a plan to disable the Crocker's key systems and buy enough time for the planet to evacuate its civilians. It was a strategy rooted in precision, one that required flawless execution and an unwavering belief in each other. As the ship approached the enemy fleet, Carvel felt a surge of anxiety, but he saw the humans steady themselves, their eyes fixed and their movements fluid. There was no room for doubt here. They had accepted the risks long before this moment. The first maneuver was a daring one. The humans unleashed a series of decoy drones that scrambled the Crocker's sensors, causing chaos among their ranks. The Crocker ships flared to life, trying to target the decoys, but their systems lagged as they tried to process the sudden influx of information. The humans seized this moment to strike, targeting the Crocker command vessel with pinpoint accuracy. The Crocker flagship took a direct hit, and their formation wavered. Carvel watched, breathless, as the humans took advantage of the confusion, slipping between the enemy lines with practiced precision. Each strike was calculated, designed to cause maximum disruption with minimal engagement. It was a dance of destruction, and Carvel was in awe of their audacity. Suddenly, the Crocker regrouped, adjusting their tactics. One of their ships managed to break through the humans' defenses, targeting the vessel Carvel was on. He felt the ship shudder under the impact, alarms blaring as the humans scrambled to stabilize. He saw the grim determination on their faces as they fought to regain control, their hands moving swiftly across controls, their voices sharp and focused. Despite the damage, they pressed on. Captain Torres gave the order to reroute power to the shields and engines, directing them into a daring evasion maneuver. They had to buy more time. The evacuation wasn't yet complete. Carvel's heart pounded as the ship dodged enemy fire, the humans showing no signs of giving up. Then, in a final, bold move, Torres directed a concentrated blast at the Crocker's weapons cache, igniting it in a brilliant explosion that threw their fleet into disarray. It was a sight of controlled chaos, the Crocker ships scrambling in confusion as their own weaponry backfired on them. In the midst of the chaos, the planet's evacuation transports launched, slipping away while the Crocker forces were still reeling. As the last of the evacuation ships cleared the battlefield, Captain Torres gave the order to retreat. The human ship pulled back, engines roaring as they sped away from the crippled Crocker fleet. Carvel exhaled a shaky breath, feeling a mix of awe and relief. The humans had done it. They had bought enough time for the evacuation, against all odds. In the aftermath, as the ship steadied, Carvel found himself looking at Torres with newfound respect. She had led her crew into a fight that should have been impossible to win, driven by a purpose he was only beginning to grasp. She met his gaze, her expression both weary and resolute. "That's what it means to be human," she said softly. Carvel took in the aftermath, grappling with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. The humans were battered but resolute, their resolve forged in something far deeper than mere survival. As the crew gathered in the med bay, attending to the injured, he noticed how they looked after one another. They laughed through their pain, sharing wry smiles and comforting words, even in the face of the narrow escape they had just made. Carvel felt an odd pang, a yearning, perhaps, for something he couldn't name. He approached Captain Torres, who was reviewing reports with a calm intensity. When she saw him, she offered a nod, her expression unreadable. That display, Carvel began, his words halting as he searched for the right way to articulate what he had witnessed. You fought as though you were protecting something far beyond yourselves. Torres looked at him thoughtfully, then nodded. We were. Back on Earth, we're raised with the idea that we're all part of something greater. It's drilled into us, not just as soldiers, but as people. Carvel's antennae twitched in thought. His own people valued unity, of course, but it was a structured unity, one based on order and obedience. The humans, however, seemed to thrive in a unity bound by choice, trust, and emotion, something fierce and unpredictable. Torres seemed to pick up on his reflection. You're wondering why we risked so much for a planet we've never seen, for people we barely know. She gave him a small smile. That's just who we are. It's why we've managed to survive all the things this galaxy has thrown at us. He pondered her words in silence, feeling a stirring of something close to envy. His own culture rarely made sacrifices without assurance of reward, yet here were these humans, offering everything simply because they felt it was right. It was a form of courage he wasn't sure he could ever embody. The crew was soon recalled to prepare for another mission. The Crockers' defeat had stirred the Assembly's confidence, leading them to send a message to all factions. They would no longer tolerate aggression against allied worlds. Humanity had proven that even the mightiest of foes could be defied. The response from the Crocker was swift and ominous, an unmistakable signal that they would not retreat easily. On the bridge, the air was tense with anticipation. Carvel could sense the apprehension among the crew, but he also saw something remarkable in their eyes, a quiet but indomitable resolve. They knew the risks. They understood that the Crocker were coming with everything they had. And yet, no one seemed ready to back down. As they approached the Assembly's designated rendezvous point, the stars around them filled with the faint glimmers of Allied ships gathering for the stand. Carvel recognized ships from nearly every species in the Assembly. He felt a swell of cautious optimism. Despite their differences, they had come together, just as the humans had hoped. Torres surveyed the gathering fleet, her expression unreadable but focused. She tapped into the communications array, broadcasting a message to every ship in the coalition. Her voice was steady, commanding but infused with a warmth that Carvel could only describe as reassuring. Today, we stand united against those who seek to break us, she began. The Crocker may have numbers and strength, but we have something far more powerful, each other. We're not just fighting for survival, we're fighting for the worlds we cherish, for the families we long to return to, and for a future where our children can grow up free from fear. Her words resonated across the fleet, stirring a ripple of resolve among the assembled allies. Carvel felt it too, a warmth spreading through him. These humans, they were different. They spoke with conviction, a passion that transcended logic or strategic advantage. It was a fervor that ignited something dormant within him. As the Crocker fleet came into view, a silence settled over the bridge. The enemy ships were massive, their hulls dark and gleaming with deadly intent. The Crocker had brought their strongest warships, each one capable of laying waste to entire planets. Yet the humans did not waver. Torres turned to her crew, her gaze steady. This is it. We fight not because we think we'll win easily, but because this is what we do. If we fall knowing we did everything in our power to protect those who depend on us. The battle began in a flurry of light and chaos. Carvel watched, awestruck, as the humans maneuvered their ship with a precision that bordered on artistry. They struck quickly and decisively, using their smaller size to dart between the Crocker ships, targeting weak points in their armor and disabling their weapons. It was a strategy that required nerve and skill, and the humans had both in spades. Despite their efforts, the battle was brutal. The Crocker retaliated with merciless force, their massive ships bearing down on the Allied fleet. One by one, Allied ships faltered under the onslaught, forced to retreat or destroyed entirely. But the humans held their ground, rallying the coalition even as the situation grew increasingly dire. Carvel found himself manning a tactical station, his hands moving swiftly as he relayed information to Torres. She took his input without hesitation, integrating it into her commands as though they had fought together for years. He marveled at her confidence in him, a trust he had not expected. The human ship took several hits, the hull groaning under the strain, but the crew didn't falter. They fought with an intensity that seemed almost reckless, but Carvel understood now, it wasn't recklessness. It was a refusal to yield. Then, in a moment of chilling clarity, he realized the Crocker were attempting to flank the humans, intending to cut off their escape route. He relayed the information to Torres, his voice urgent. She assessed the situation with a swift glance, her jaw tightening. All right. We're going to need to draw them off. She issued orders to the crew, preparing for a risky maneuver that would leave them exposed but might buy the other Allied ships time to regroup. The ship lurched as they accelerated, drawing the Crocker closer. Carvel felt his pulse race as they skimmed dangerously close to the enemy ships, narrowly evading their fire. The humans' tactic worked. Several Crocker ships broke formation to pursue, giving the Allied fleet a brief respite. In that narrow window, Carvel saw a renewed vigor among the Allies. The other ships regrouped, launching a coordinated assault that forced the Crocker back. Bit by bit, they began to push the Crocker into a retreat, their formation disintegrating under the relentless pressure. As the Crocker ships finally withdrew, defeated and scattered, a cheer erupted among the human crew. They had defied the odds, turned back a force that had seemed unstoppable, and secured a hard-won victory for the assembly. Captain Torres took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing as the tension lifted. She turned to Carvel, her gaze softening. You fought well today. We couldn't have done this without you. In the aftermath of the battle, the mood on board was a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. Repairs began immediately, with the crew working side by side, their focus unwavering despite their obvious fatigue. The Allied fleet was regrouping as well, each ship tending to its wounded, acknowledging the human crew's efforts with silent nods over the calm channels. The victory had resonated among them, and Carvel sensed a newfound unity across the coalition, a bond forged in shared struggle and defiance. Carvel joined Torres on the bridge as she transmitted a final report to the Assembly's headquarters. Her voice, steady and clear, held a quiet satisfaction, a reflection of the crew's hard-won achievement. She thanked every ship captain personally, a gesture of respect that wasn't lost on any of them. Carvel watched her, struck by the genuine pride she took in the crew's resilience and in the coalition's success. He felt that pride, too, a realization that surprised him. As the communication ended, Carvel turned to her, studying her in silence for a moment. Captain, he began slowly, I did not expect this to end in our favor. Torres gave him a small, understanding smile. Neither did we. But that's never stopped us before. He pondered her words, the familiar yearning returning. He had spent much of his life believing strength was found only in the tangible, in physical prowess, in superior technology. Yet these humans, these allies, they had defied that belief, proving that strength could also be found in something unseen but deeply felt. He realized that he envied them for that. A sudden call came in from the assembly, requesting Torres and Carvel's presence for a debrief. The Assembly Council, composed of dignitaries from every species represented, appeared on screen. Their expressions were a mix of respect, gratitude, and curiosity as they addressed the human captain. Captain Torres, the counselor began, you and your crew have achieved something unprecedented. You have forced the Crocker to retreat and unified our coalition in a way we had not thought possible. Your methods, your resilience, they are unlike anything we have encountered. Torres accepted their praise with humility, her response sincere and direct. We fought to protect what we believe in, to preserve the lives that matter to us. Our methods are simply a reflection of who we are. The counselor's gaze shifted to Carvel, who remained silent but attentive. Commander Carvel, you stood beside the humans, shared in their struggle. What insight have you gained from this experience? Carvel took a deep breath, considering his answer carefully. I have seen that strength does not lie solely in technology or power. It lies in conviction, in the willingness to sacrifice for something greater. The humans have shown us that. The counselor nodded thoughtfully, seeming to consider his words. Then perhaps our coalition has more to learn from one another than we previously believed. We will need that unity in the battles to come. The Crocker will not accept defeat so easily. The meeting concluded with a renewed commitment from each member species to strengthen their alliance, to protect one another against the threat that loomed. As the screen faded, Torres turned to Carvel with a faint smile, her eyes reflecting a quiet pride. "Looks like you've made an impression on the council," she remarked. Carvel felt a rare sense of satisfaction. "It was you and your crew who did that. I merely spoke what I had witnessed." As the days passed, the crew adjusted to a new reality. They were hailed as heroes within the coalition, their success against the Crocker celebrated across allied worlds. But the human crew remained focused, their humility tempered by the knowledge that the Crocker would return. There was no time for complacency. Carvel found himself drawn into the crew's daily routines, working alongside them, learning from their methods. He observed how they strategized, how they discussed their missions with openness and honesty. Even in moments of disagreement, there was a profound respect that guided their actions, a shared understanding that their purpose was larger than any one individual. One evening, Carvel joined Torres in the observation deck, where she often spent time in quiet reflection. The vastness of space stretched before them, stars twinkling in the endless blackness. "You've changed, you know," Torres said, breaking the silence. Her tone was gentle but direct. Carvel considered her words, surprised by the observation. "Perhaps I have. Being here, it has given me a different perspective." Torres nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You remind me of some of my crew. They were different once too. Over time, you learn that the strength we find in each other is what makes us resilient." He looked at her, feeling a sense of clarity that he hadn't before. "Captain, I believe I understand that now." She regarded him with a warmth that was rare in their line of work. "Then you're one of us, Carvel. Welcome to the crew." The words settled over him like a gentle weight, both a responsibility and a comfort. For the first time, he felt as if he truly belonged, not merely as an ally but as part of something larger, something that resonated with the core of who he was. As they stood there in silence, a message came in, a warning from the assembly. The Crocker had regrouped, and they were preparing to launch an all-out assault. Their retaliation was swift and merciless, and this time, the assembly believed they intended to leave no survivors. Torres's expression hardened, her calm determination taking over. She called the crew to action, her voice firm as she outlined their strategy. This was no ordinary battle. This was a fight for their very existence, a test of the unity they had forged. Carvel joined her on the bridge, feeling the weight of the impending conflict. But this time, he was ready. He knew that he would fight not just as an ally but as a part of something he now believed in. The crew moved with a sense of purpose that he found infectious, each member embodying the unyielding spirit he had come to admire. As they braced for the coming battle, Carvel felt an unfamiliar but welcome sensation, a fierce loyalty to his comrades, a conviction that they would overcome whatever the Crocker threw at them. Together, they were stronger than he had ever imagined. When the first Crocker ships appeared on the scanners, Torres addressed the crew, her voice steady and inspiring. "We know what's at stake," she said, her gaze sweeping over her crew. "We know what we're fighting for. Remember that we are not just defending ourselves, we are defending every world that has placed its trust in us. Today, we fight as one." Carvel felt a surge of pride, a sense of purpose that resonated deep within him. This was no longer a fight of survival alone. It was a battle to protect the ideals they all held dear, the unity they had forged through blood and sacrifice. The Crocker ships drew closer, their intentions unmistakable. The human crew readied themselves, their faces set with determination, their actions precise and practiced. Carvel took his position, knowing that he would give everything to protect those beside him. As the battle commenced, the ship rocked with the impact of enemy fire, but the crew held their ground. They maneuvered with a fluidity born of trust and understanding, each member anticipating the other's moves, working as one cohesive unit. The Crocker were relentless, but so were they. Hours passed in a haze of intensity, each moment a test of their strength, their endurance. Carvel felt the fatigue creeping in, but he pushed it aside, driven by a newfound resilience. He could see it in the faces around him. These humans, his comrades, would fight until the very end. And then, in a decisive move, Torres ordered a final maneuver, one that required every ounce of their remaining energy. The ship plunged forward, weaving between the Crocker vessels, exploiting weaknesses they had identified through sheer determination and ingenuity. One by one, the Crocker ships fell back, their formation breaking as they realized they had underestimated the humans yet again. In a last-ditch effort, the coalition struck, forcing the Crocker into full retreat. As the battle ended, the crew erupted in exhausted cheers, the relief palpable. Torres turned to Carvel, offering a weary but genuine smile. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. Carvel nodded, a sense of accomplishment settling over him. He had found his place, his purpose, among those who fought not just for survival, but for each other, for a future they all believed in.